Hey everyone! So our April Shadows and Secrets box features a book that takes place in a very unique city all about casinos. It inspired us to create a video recommending some books to you that feature gritty cities within them. So without further ado, let's get into it. So this will come as no surprise. It is the city of Ketterdam from Six of Crows by Leigh Bardugo. Ketterdam is just a city unlike any other. It is really dark, really gritty. The city itself is like quite industrious, and it has a lot of harbors. It's also a port city. And then the characters that we follow are in a street gang essentially, so you get to see the entire world of the street gangs and all of the different gangs that are there kind of fighting for territory, and it's just really fascinating. So Six of Crows doesn't actually take place too much in Ketterdam other than at the beginning, because this book is about a heist to a prison that is further away, but the sequel, Crooked Kingdom, like features almost entirely in the city, and that's really where you get to discover all of its nooks and crannies and kind of fall in love with it. Leigh Bardugo just has such a way with words that the way that she describes the city and its smells and everything, you really feel like you're there, even though you wouldn't actually want to be there in real life because it sounds kind of gross to be honest, but it's a fascinating story to read about, especially following this cast of characters.
So the first city I'm going to talk about is Luthadel from the Mistborn trilogy by Brandon Sanderson. This city immediately came to mind when we were going to do this recommendations video because it is just so dark and creepy. In this city, there is constantly ash falling from the sky, there are no plants that are not brown, and at night creepy magical mists come in and people are afraid of these mists, so they won't go outside at night. Luthadel is just such an interesting place. It is also in this first book kind of ruled by a dictator called the Lord Ruler, and he has also suppressed technology in the city, so there hasn't been really any advancements to help make the city become better. Now, I've talked about Mistborn before, everybody knows what these books are about, but they are just some really great and very accessible adult high fantasy novels, and I will say it again, if you're looking to bridge into adult fantasy, I think this trilogy is an awesome place to start.
Next up, I wanted to talk about Gunslinger Girl by Lindsay. This was such a cool read. It's about a girl named Serendipity who is grown up in a commune, and her father wants to marry her off, and she doesn't like this, so she escapes for the commune with her best friend, and they head to a city that they've only heard about called Cessation. Cessation kind of reminded me of like a Las Vegas type city. There's a lot of glitz and glamour, casinos, and our main character actually ends up kind of auditioning for a circus, and she gets in there as a sharpshooter because she's really good with a gun, and it's just such a cool city to read about. Everything is just so like lit up and bright, and you get to see inside the inner workings of the circus. Now, I won't say too much more about this because I don't want to spoil any surprises, but there is a woman who kind of governs over this entire city, and if you cross her, bad things will happen. I just absolutely love the entire setting of this city because the author brilliantly combines both a glitzy casino with a wild western, and I just thought that was such a cool concept.
Next up, I have the city of Comore from The Lies of Locke Lamora by Scott Lynch. Comore is a really interesting city because this is definitely a fantasy novel, but Comore itself almost feels like it came from a science fiction novel. In the city, the foundation is this thing called elderglass, which is this material that all of the residents of Comore currently have no idea how it came to be, what it is, how it was built, because the people who built it have long left this area. So around this elderglass city, and elderglass is an indestructible material, so they can't get rid of it. So they have built up the city like around these elderglass spires, which sounds really interesting. Comore is known throughout this entire world as being like the seediest and darkest and nobody should go there city, and when people reveal they're from Comore, they're kind of looked down upon. Now, there are like wealthier places in this city, but this definitely follows a gang of con men and thieves, and they definitely operate in kind of the grimier parts of this city. The city in here is just so atmospheric and almost kind of feels like its own character because it really plays into the plot points in this book in such a meaningful way. The continuation of the series doesn't necessarily take place in Comore, but I still find myself coming back to this first book and missing this setting.
So next up is a fairly new release. It's The Bells by Dhonielle Clayton, and this story is inspired heavily by the city of New Orleans. The city in this book is actually called Orleans. And in this world, its citizens are born gray and without beauty. But there are a special selection of people who are born with powers called the Bells, and they essentially can manipulate beauty and help people become more beautiful, but it doesn't last for very long. Every generation of the Bells kind of compete to become the royal favorite and live in the palace, but if you aren't chosen to be the royal favorite, you are then sent to work in tea houses around the city. So people go to these tea houses to have their beauty treatments done, but as you read the book, you soon discover that the way that the tea houses are run is not quite as it seems, and there's definitely a seedy underbelly to this city.
Next up, I have Fell's March from the Demon King by Cinda Williams-Chima. Now, I've only read this first book in this series, so I'm not sure if the continuations will continue to take place in Fell's March, but I really enjoyed the setting in this one. Now, Fell's March was previously a fairly prosperous city. It is actually where the Queen lives, but this book follows our hero, Han Hollister, who is a kind of reformed thief doing his best to keep his family alive in this decrepit and corrupt city. It feels like the people who live in this city kind of have no loyalty. It's full of gangs, even the government guards and the royal guards are full of corruption, and you're never really sure who to trust. I really enjoyed this first book, and I am looking forward to reading more of the series soon.
Next up is This Savage Song by Victoria Schwab, one of my favorite books and most unique cities, I think. It's a city called Verity. There are 3 different types of monsters that inhabit this city and are kind of wreaking havoc on its citizens. They are called the Korsai, the Malkai, and the Sunai. So the city of Verity is actually kind of split right in half, and one half is run by the Flynn family, who kind of operate from a sense of fear and use it as a military base, and then the other half is run by the Harker family. And if you live on the Harker half, you can pay to have the monsters leave you alone. We follow 2 different characters from these 2 different families. You have August Flynn, who is a Sunai monster, and all that he wishes is that he could become human. And then you have Kate Harker, who is human and wishes she could be a bit more monstrous like her father. So this city is really, really scary. The way that Victoria Schwab describes the monsters and how they operate, like within the shadows, sneaking up on people, murdering people. It's quite terrifying, and I thought it was also just really unique. The way that these monsters come about is from human acts of violence, so I found that really fascinating as well. And if you're just looking for like a kind of new, really scary type of dystopian story, I think you would really enjoy this one.
So next up, I actually have multiple cities called Coldtowns from The Coldest Girl in Coldtown by Holly Black. Now, these cold towns are kind of unique and different because they were created by governments to contain the epidemic of vampires in the world. So in this world, a vampire can bite a human, and then that human turns cold. Once somebody turns cold, if they then drink the blood of another human, they'll turn into a vampire. So that basically the government has created these cities so that anybody who's been turned cold can kind of be rounded up and put in these cities so that it doesn't infect the general population. Once you're in this city, it's pretty much impossible to leave, so inside kind of humans and vampires kind of commingle and exist in this kind of like predator-prey relationship inside these walls. It's dark and gritty and very interesting, and there's also humans in this world who want nothing better to get inside the cold towns. I really love this book. I think it's one of Holly Black's more underrated books. If you haven't read it yet, I totally recommend picking it up. Alright, so those are just a few of the books that we love that feature some rather interesting cities within them. If you have some other suggestions, let us know down in the comments, because we are definitely open to more recommendations. As per usual, please like this video and subscribe to our channel. Happy reading, and thanks for being awesome. Bye!
Bye!